Hello, listeners. My name is Cliff Ratza. I'm the author of two ongoing series of novels, the Lightning Brain series and its sequel, the Keepers series. And in addition to being an author and a writing coach, I teach at universities and have a consulting business. If you'd like to learn more about me, my books, or my writing coach activities, please contact Prime Solutions via the lightningbrainseries.com website. Now, I try to make videos that I think authors and writers, as well as most people, might enjoy listening to. I want to cover material in a manner that you might not see on the news or in other YouTube or similar videos. I figured that if I can't find a different point of view, there's no reason for me to add something that you can find elsewhere. Well, the title of this video is Rational versus Magical Thinking. Both types of thinking help us. We all know what rational thinking is. It is using reason, which, as Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking, Fast and Slow, says, is thinking slow, as opposed to thinking fast or emotionally. But what is magical thinking? Well, here's the Wikipedia definition. Magical thinking is the belief that one's ideas, thoughts, actions, words, or use of symbols can influence the course of events in the material world. Magical thinking presumes a causal link between one's inner personal experience and the external physical world. Here are some examples. Avoiding sidewalk cracks, or wearing a lucky shirt, or believing you saved a loved one from a terrible fate by thinking that your warnings kept them safe. Lots of people have superstitions, like not opening an umbrella inside or letting a black cat cross their path. Others also follow meaningful religious and cultural practices that connect them to their community, even if those practices would seem to defy logic. These are all examples of magical thinking. But if magical thinking causes you to perform actions to neutralize these intrusive thoughts, some psychiatrists might say it's a symptom of a mental health condition if the practice is carried to an extreme. And here are three conditions that are often connected to magical thinking. Obsessive compulsive disorder, it's abbreviated OCD. Schizophrenia, which is disconnecting or splitting from the real world, and paranoia, which is unusual thinking, often accompanied by unreasonable fear. All these conditions are treatable and manageable. So magical thinking describes a set of beliefs that two unrelated events or phenomena in the world are connected and affect each other, even though they may have no actual connection. Someone may believe that performing an action can stop a certain event. What makes the thinking magical is that the two elements, the action and the event, have no logical connection. Here are additional examples. In adults, if I don't tap the doorknob 3 times before leaving, my house will catch on fire. In children, if I blow all these dandelion seeds and wish for a new bike, one will appear in the driveway. It's not known how magical thinking first develops in adults, but it is a natural part of early childhood development. According to psychologists, children ages 2 to 5 are naturally egocentric, and their belief that things happen because of their actions will usually fade. It briefly may resurface at the beginning of adolescence, and then fades again as they become adults. And a high self-serving bias, which is common in conditions such as schizophrenia, may reinforce magical thinking. As I mentioned earlier, in some mental health conditions such as OCD, magical thinking leads to the performance of certain rituals. Magical thoughts can cause significant tension and distress, which is only relieved by doing a certain action. In this type of OCD, the thought is the obsession, while the action is the compulsion. People with and without mental health conditions may participate in rituals as part of religious or cultural beliefs or heritage. This need not be a cause for concern. Cultural or religious influences are explicitly considered as a qualifier for not being magical thinking in the mental health profession. And there is scientific evidence that participation in religious rituals contributes to social well-being and feeling of group identity because it contributes to a sense of belonging or being accepted into a larger, caring community. In OCD, magical thinking can often lead people to perform specific action or ritual. They may articulate that they understand that the thinking is not logical, but still feel compelled to complete an action in order to prevent harm to someone or to stop bad things from happening. And in those with schizophrenia, magical thinking may be closely related to auditory hallucinations. For folks with schizophrenia, there's often no comprehension for the belief that the behavior and events relationship aren't logical. It can be challenging to know how to relate to someone with magical thinking. If your loved one has schizophrenia, it can help to focus on the emotion they feel and offer support. If a friend or family member has OCD, you might want to encourage them to talk about their feelings. It usually doesn't help anyone managing a mental health condition to hear that their experiences are not real. Magical thinking may be one way people with OCD regain a sense of control over intrusive thoughts. So magical thinking may be a coping mechanism for obsessive beliefs. Try to relate to them in a non-judgmental way by actively listening. You may be able to find other ways to deal with the compulsion and distress caused by the magical thought, such as by offering emotional support. Friends and family members of people with OCD or schizophrenia can also seek advice from a therapist or mental health professional who works with families. If you think you may see yourself in some descriptions of magical thinking, there are steps you can take to ensure your well-being. Often you can distinguish common magical thinking behaviors from problematic ones. Simply having a belief and a ritual does not necessarily cause a problem, even if others may see your thoughts and actions as magical thinking. But if magical thinking becomes an obsession that leads to compulsion, you may want to seek advice and guidance from a mental health professional. Treatment options for harmful magical thinking include types of talk therapy, among others. For OCD, a technique called exposure response prevention therapy, or ERP, can help manage magical thinking so you become accustomed to not performing a ritual, even if you encounter an obsessive thought. For schizophrenia, a combination of talk therapy and medication can help with symptoms, including magical thinking. So let's recap. If magical thinking stems from cultural, religious, or lighthearted traditions and isn't obsessive, it can be harmless, connect you with your community, and even be self-soothing. Alternatively, magical thinking that's a symptom of mental health condition can cause distress for the individual and their loved ones. Seeking help from a mental health professional for treatment, which should include talk therapy more than medication, can help manage the behavior. You might ask, does magical thinking work? For some people it might. Here are some examples. Basketball player Ray Allen's pregame routine never changes. Or Joe DiMaggio's jersey that he wore throughout his 56-game hitting streak. There's actually some science behind magical thinking and the edge that it can give people. But it's better to acknowledge that the performance is a function of what goes on in your brain rather than a product of any mystical properties of the object itself. And use the mystical thinking to cushion the placebo or dedication effect. And don't think about the science of astronomy stripping the starry night of its awe. Just play along for the fun of it all. I recently read a book, The 7 Laws of Magical Thinking by Matthew Hudson, which is his anecdotal attempt to categorize magical beliefs into these 7 categorical laws. 1. Objects carry essences. For example, John Lennon's piano is revered. 2. Symbols have power. In baseball, for example, the GOAT that jinxed the Chicago Cubs for over a century of no National League pennants or World Series championships. 3. Actions have consequences, like always sitting in the same chair at a meeting. 4. The mind has no bounds. For example, the power of a crowd rooting for the home team will energize it to win. The crowd's power transcends that of the individual fans. 5. The soul lives on. People do not want to accept the finality of death, so many believe each person has a soul that survives after the body perishes. 6. The world is alive. Inanimate objects or plants and trees possess invisible spirits. If you talk to your car, that's an example. 7. Everything happens for a reason. The human brain is always on the hunt for connections, for reasons explaining cause and effect. Of course, there is no hard evidence for any of this, but our DNA likes to give them the benefit of the doubt. And let me end with these observations. During war, there are no atheists in a foxhole. And many atheists say they like living in a world inhabited by believers, because in both cases there is comfort built by believing in something that transcends mere humanity. Something that says there is a reason, a purpose for getting up each morning and seizing the day. Even though it is up to each of us to find our own purpose and meaning in life, sometimes it is nice to believe in magic. And let me make a final observation regarding emotional thinking. Chicago's local news on the 4th of July covered nearly nonstop the tragic shootings at a Highland Park parade. And many officials, when interviewed, said they couldn't imagine how the families of the victims felt or find the right words to comfort them. But that might not be quite right. Neuroscientists tell us that our brains have mirror neurons that trigger similar feelings in ourselves as those of the people suffering in the events we see. And authors and writers are known for how their empathetic words paint an indelible image in the minds of readers. So, words in time of need can be found if we let our minds and emotions work the way they are intended. So on that optimistic note, I will end here and say thank you for watching. And bye-bye until next time.